Hello and welcome to the Primis Propositions Vodcast here in the Lion Room. I'm Matt Brown, Head of Proposition, and as usual, I'm joined by Nikki Flax, our Proposition Manager. Hiya, Nikki.
Hi, Matt, and hi to everybody joining our next episode of Hear the Line Roar.
Hello. So we've got a good guest today. We do tend to line up some crackers, don't we, Nikki? So today we have got Guardian's National Account Manager. We've got Paul Roberts. Hi, Paul. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Matt. Hi, Nikki. How are we?
Yeah, very well.
Good,
Thank you,
thanks.
Matt. So lovely to see you, Paul. For those who don't know you who are watching the podcast today or listening on Spotify, might I add, because we've now popped that on as part of the equation, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes, well, I have been at Guardian now for 5 years. So started off as a BDM to begin with, looked after a lot of the accounts for Primis across Scotland, Northern Ireland and in the Northeast. And then more latterly moved into the National Account Manager role about 18 months or so ago. Been in the industry for 20 years, really. Started off at Scottish Widows, helped launch the Scottish Widows Protect product to market, and then joined Guardian, like I say, kind of 2019. Outside of work, very much into my sport, family stuff, play a lot of golf, football, that type of thing. So yeah, I'm busy over the weekends as during the week as well when I'm at work.
Fantastic, that's good. Welcome to today. We'll get into the questions then, Paul. So Guardian recently sponsored some research from the charity Young Lives versus Cancer to highlight and understand the financial costs to families who have a child living with cancer. Paul, can you firstly tell us why Guardian found it important to support this research?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. I think there's two parts to this, really. Firstly, and most importantly, we wanted to support the charity because the work that they do is absolutely fantastic. And actually, we've learned a lot more about the great work that they do as we started to work with them with the research. Young Lives versus Cancer's purpose is to exist because no family should have to face cancer alone. And when we get into some of the research over the next 10, 15 minutes, it is a real eye-opener into the challenges that families will face into in the back of their child being diagnosed with cancer. And then the second reason was we wanted to support the research to really help raise awareness on the importance about having those right protection conversations and making sure that the right protection was in place to support with the financial challenges that families will face into. And we know it's not an easy subject to talk about at times. Parents generally child being seriously ill. And we appreciate it's not always an easy conversation for advisors to have with their clients as well, because it is a sensitive subject at the end of the day. And I guess historically, there has probably been less need to have in-depth conversations around children's kick, mainly because children's kick has automatically come bolted into an adult critical illness cover policy. But more and more providers are now providing greater flexibility with their children's kicks offering, meaning that parents now have more flexibility and more options when it comes to including children's kick now. And of course, that then means that some of those challenging conversations now need to be had. So hopefully the research will help advisors with those conversations and around positioning children's kick as well.
Absolutely. And obviously, Paul, I know you're really keen to share the key findings from the research with us today. Could you start off by talking us through what the research tells us about the cost to a family who have a young child living with cancer?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every diagnosis comes with an additional cost. The most common and significant of these is the cost of travelling to treatment. So given its specialist nature, cancer treatment for children and young people largely takes place in a small number of hospitals and centres across the country. And to get to these hospitals and treatment centres, many young cancer patients and their families often have to travel long distances, and that might even be several times a week. So as a result, nearly all young cancer patients and their families, 96% of those that responded, have reported having to pay an extra cost on that travel and just to follow up on the diagnosis. It's costing somewhere around about £250 a month. Now, while some of those young cancer patients and their families use different forms of transport to attend treatment, the majority, 93%, reported using a car for at least some of their journey. And given the additional travel involved in getting to and from the treatment, the dependence on cars to make these journeys. And again, from a young cancer patient and their family's perspective, it's then costing them extra to keep those vehicles on the road. So these extra costs include things like car maintenance and repairs. The report highlights around about a £17 a month increase on that. And even things like insurance premiums and breakdown cover add a further £5 across both those areas as well. So to be able to make the journeys to treatment, some young cancer patients and their families also have to spend additional costs on childcare. So again, thinking about those families where there's more than one child involved, again, it may be a case that the family are travelling those distances and therefore don't have the support at home to pick up the childcare effectively. So there's additional costs that then come into play for that as well. And the report highlights that roughly 1 in 5 cancer patients and their families, so 21%, reported having that extra cost per month for childcare. So on average, young cancer patients and their family have to spend an extra £30 a month on childcare, which again starts to add up on top of the travel that they've got just to get to the treatment centres alone. So you can see how the costs start to spiral for the family, and we're only at the hospital at this stage. We've not gone beyond that. So there's still a lot more that the report out from the conclusions as well.
Totally, Paul. Really good points. And you know, I think we've seen a significant increase from, you know, a family's outgoings, which just involves travelling to and from the hospital or the treatment centre, along with those additional costs for childcare for those families that have more than one child. But I suppose, you know, just thinking, what are some of the other costs that we don't always consider that the research has perhaps highlighted?
Yeah, you're spot on, Matt. The extra costs don't stop when they're allowed to get the treatment. Again, 2/3, 65% almost, were faced with parking costs. And again, the frequency and the length of time young cancer patients and their families have to spend at hospitals and treatment centres can mean these costs quite quickly build up. Now, there will be scenarios where free parking and concessions are available, but at some hospitals and treatment centres, that's not the case. And it's far from universal that all cancer patients and their families across the UK will get free parking. And one family reported in the research that even though at times they've had access to free parking, it isn't applied to all their appointments. So again, they're having to pay high parking costs just to spend the hours at the hospital. So it's, again, costs that we probably don't necessarily think about when we see that bigger number in regards to what the diagnosis of cancer costs to individuals. And then again, when you factor in the fact that you've got young cancer patients travelling long distances and the length of time that they're spending in these places as well, the cost can quite quickly spiral from that point of view as well. And we can also add in things like the overnight stays and the costs that are then aligned to that as well. And there will be scenarios where there's the option for the families to stay at the treatment centres or the hospitals. But again, that won't always be the case. And the report again highlights that 1 in 10 are having to pay to stay overnight when their child is in one of the treatment centres or hospitals. So again, it adds an additional £14 a month onto the additional outgoings just for the accommodation to go with it as well.
So much to think about, isn't there? And I'm assuming with the long period spent travelling at the hospital or treatment centres and the overnight stays, what about the increase to outgoings for food?
Yeah, again, another great point. Spending significant time travelling to and from treatment centres and commonly being without options to cook or refrigerate facilities while they're at these hospitals and accommodations leaves them with little choice but to pay extra for food. And it's not just the additional costs when they're not at home, even when they are at home after treatment. If they're not well enough to attend education or employment, of course, it means that young cancer patients and their families continue to face extra costs for food. So following treatment, young cancer patients and their families are reported to buy more specific or specialist foods. And again, that will be taken into account with regards to the treatment that the patients themselves are going through. So additional hygiene caution around the types of food that they buy and pay for. And then that all factors in again to the additional costs that they're facing into. So the report again highlights that young cancer patients and their families, roughly 96%, reported paying more on food after the diagnosis. And actually, it's £144 a month on average that they see the additional spend specific to that requirement. So again, a significant cost, and that's just specific really to the additional needs that the young individuals will have on the back of their treatment.
Well, it's just so much to think about, isn't it? It's crazy. You know, it is easy to overlook a lot of these extra costs when you're not directly involved in this type of situation. Now, most of us will have an awareness that there is an added cost to having a cancer diagnosis, but, you know, I'm sure not many will have fully understood how these costs are broken down.
Yeah, definitely. And more, I mean, it must be difficult enough trying to cope with the emotional side of having a child that's diagnosed with cancer first and foremost, without having to then worry about the financial implications that come with that as well. And there's still other factors that we've the research highlights too that we've not talked about today. But again, when you think about the treatment, young patients and their families and all the additional spend that they've got going on thus far, there's still things like clothing and energy costs that then come into it as well, which are all additional spends. And again, the report highlights that roughly 65% of those that were researched on the back of it have highlighted spending extra on clothing. Again, with young cancer patients and their families having to spend roughly an average of £56 a month in this area. And these extra costs result very much from young cancer patients and their families having to buy additional clothing in response to the impact that the treatment will have on their bodies. So again, in addition to this, they need to be making sure they've got the suitable and sufficient clothing for the time on the ward, the journey back and forth. And again, it all comes at an additional cost. And then you've got 3 in 5 young cancer patients and their families reporting to be paying more on their energy bills following their diagnosis. So again, on average, it's costing them an extra £68 a month. And these extra energy costs result from a different range of factors. These include spending more time at home in between the hospital visits. And it could also be because of young cancer patients immunocompressed or feeling colder because of the treatment. And again, all the energy costs that come from that are then reflected into what the outgoings are for that family as well. And then, of course, there's the additional things like the extra washing, drying, cleaning, that sort of stuff as well that will need to be done for the hygiene factors when the child's at home too. So it's a bigger picture than just looking at the high level number of what the cost implications are. It's actually when you start to break it down, a lot of these things probably are overlooked or aren't even thought about in the situation.
Yeah, Paul, that's been really, really insightful overview of the financial costs of a family who, in the unfortunate positions to have a child living with cancer. And you've mentioned a number of different areas and what each individual area costs on average, but what is the overall cost to a family?
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. I think looking at the overall figure, I think we've probably got a figure in our mind, or we've had figures in the past where we've understood what that total cost in theory looks like, or the average cost in theory looks like. But the research has definitely highlighted that when you incorporate all the outgoings collectively, they add up to a significant amount, and actually that amount is going up. So the average across families for the cost of living with a child with cancer is around about £691 a month. Now, the research also breaks that down further. So lone parents were among the groups that reported paying the most in extra costs. And not only are these extra costs significant, but they appear to have increased substantially really over recent years. So since undertaking previous research on this in 2017, Young Lives versus Cancer found that young cancer patients and their families spent an average of £600 extra a month. So the latest data over the last 5-6 years is suggesting around about a 15% increase on that figure. And the most substantial increases appear to be taken around the cost of travel, childcare and food, like we've highlighted. But one other thing to consider here as well is that £691 extra a month is outgoings that are going out the way. That's before you even start to incorporate actually what the loss of income may look like for families that want to take time off to support their child after that cancer diagnosis as well.
I was just thinking that before you said it, Paul, that 691's enough as it is, isn't it? But then, you lose some income as well. You're suddenly really in a difficult position whilst probably going through hell. So, really good point. Did the research highlight how much that would affect the average family, just to try and put that into context?
Yeah, it did. And again, being a parent myself, I think the first thing you would want to do if you were ever in that unfortunate situation is make sure you had that time off to be at the bedside of your child. And having to take that time off work or away would be a factor again that's at the very forefront of your mind with regards to, before you even consider the additional outgoings, the fact that you've got less of an income coming in the way, but ultimately your main focus is being on your child. And again, roughly 7 in 10 young cancer patients and their families experienced a loss of income in the research. The loss of income and earnings appear to be more common for those that live outside of England, interestingly, with the research suggesting that those that live in Northern Ireland, Wales and Scotland were more likely to see their income and earnings decrease following a cancer diagnosis. And again, the age that children and young people are diagnosed also seems to influence whether households experience a loss of income and earnings as well. And with those with the younger children being more likely to report income losses, but the research also suggested that the longer term the treatment goes on, the more likely that young cancer patients and their families are to experience a loss of income as well. So with the time that they had to take away from building up, and their ability to juggle work and treatment becomes more difficult and increasingly harder. For some young cancer patients, their treatment can last for years. And again, the reasons for the income losses were varied as young cancer patients and their families were forced to utilise a range of approaches and taking time off or away from paid work following the diagnosis. And again, the research kind of highlighted that some young cancer patients and their families experience these losses while still maintaining their employment by taking things like additional holidays. So 29% of people reported taking additional holidays to try and juggle between the two, taking sick time off and compassionate leave as well. So roughly 40% would look to use some sick time where applicable, and 35% take compassionate leave. And then you've got the other segment that would then look to change their working arrangements to allow for more flexibility, again, to be able to help and support their child as well. And again, that's quite a high number, 35%. So again, the challenge you've got with that is there could be a drop of income. It could be less convenient working hours, or when they are working, again, they're not at the bedside of their child, which is ultimately going to be their main priority and their main concern. And for almost a third of households with someone employed prior to diagnosis, income losses resulted from at least one of the adults stopping working entirely. And these income losses can be significant. So for households experiencing a loss of income and earnings, this averaged out around about £6,117 a year. Yet for 3 in 10 of these households experiencing a reduction in their income, it exceeded over £10,000 a year. And that, again, remember, is before we've even factored in that you're looking at just under £700 a month extra going out the door as well. So it is a real eye-opener with regards to the consequences from a financial perspective, and ultimately where we, in the industry that we're in, we can certainly take those measures to have those conversations and make sure that clients are fully aware of this and actually what support can be in place to make sure that one less thing is there for them less to worry about with the financial implications, when their full focus should be and can be then on their child.
Yeah, totally, Paul. And, like you started that with, as a parent of young children myself, you kind of put yourself in these situations and start thinking about it as a situation that you really don't want to be in. It's been real eye-opening, Paul. And it goes to show, I guess, the important role that our advisors at Primis and advisors across the industry take on when discussing the importance of children's kick. So is this research available to view in greater detail if an advisor's listening to this and thinks, I want to know more, I want to talk to my clients about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I go back to say what I said at the start. Today was all about highlighting the financial impact on a family with a child living with cancer. And for those advisors that are proactively talking to their clients about the importance of having cover in place that can help them remove that burden of thinking about how the family is going to be able to cope financially should the worst case scenario happen, keep doing what you're doing. For those advisors that do find that conversation a little bit more challenging, hopefully some of this research will help with some angles to approach the conversation. It's definitely much better to be having those difficult conversations now as opposed to when it's too late. And then when the family, of course, are faced not only with a seriously ill child, which will ultimately be their main priority, but also that worry and concern about how they deal with the financial implications of being diagnosed with cancer as well. I mean, let's be honest, 691 is a significant amount of money per month to find as an additional outgoing. It's in theory like a second mortgage to some. Most advisors listening today will be talking to their clients about protecting their mortgage. So why wouldn't you be talking to your clients about protecting and making sure you've got protection in place to cover what would feel like a second mortgage to some should their child be diagnosed with cancer? And going back to your point, yep, the research is available, Matt. It's all on our website, the full report's there. And I would encourage anyone that needs support and positioning the importance of children's kick to view it. And of course, reach out to your BDMs across the industry as well, because again, that's what they're there to help and support with as well. It's a real eye-opener, like we've said. It's a difficult conversation, we know that, and it's something that nobody ever wants to think about. But I think the research does highlight the importance that those conversations have on clients and actually making sure that they've got that protection in place should the worst case scenario happen.
Yeah, totally agree with everything you've said, Paul. Definitely encourage people to use BDM teams. And also, if you think back to the Amy viewpoint that we had a couple of weeks ago around protection, it was talking about advisors being the voice and advisors talking about real life situations, real stories. So I think these stats, what you've just touched on, really do bring to life a horrific position that nobody wants to be in. But if they're in that position, if they've got the right levels of protection, it's one less worry, isn't it? So I think we just need to encourage advisors to make sure they're armed with the tools to let people think before anybody's in an unfortunate event and they haven't had that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Paul, we're just about out of time. It's been lovely having you on today. Great to see you. I'm sure it's snowing in Scotland. No?
Yeah, not quite, but we're only a few days away, I think. Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thanks for coming on, Paul. And as we said,
appreciate
if
that.
anybody's got any questions, please reach out to your BDMs, or even our experts team can put you in touch with your Guardian BDMs. Thanks a lot, mate, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks,
See you
Paul.
soon.